The early autumn sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Fort Benton, Montana Territory, as Nora Barrett clutched her worn leather satchel with trembling fingers. 1878 had been the cruelest year of her 26 years, taking her husband, their meager savings, and nearly her dignity. All she had left were the clothes on her back and 2 hungry children waiting at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. The journey west had depleted what little remained after the funeral, and now she stood before the imposing Double Circle Ranch, her last hope in a world that had shown her little kindness. The Double Circle was the largest spread in the territory, stretching across rolling hills of golden prairie grass toward the distant mountains. The main house stood proud against the landscape, 2 stories of sturdy timber and stone that spoke of prosperity and permanence, qualities Nora had once taken for granted in her own life. She hesitated at the base of the porch steps, her resolve faltering as dust from the yard clung to the hem of her black mourning dress. "You looking for something, madam?" The deep voice startled her, and Nora spun around to find herself face to face with a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. Owen Abernathy removed his hat, revealing sun-weathered features and eyes the color of a summer storm. At 32, life had etched its hardships into the corners of those eyes, but there remained something kind in his gaze as he regarded the slender woman before him. I was told in town you might be hiring, Mr. Abernathy," Nora said, willing her voice not to betray her desperation. "For housekeeping or cooking, I'm capable with both." Owen studied her for a long moment. Her hands were too soft for ranch work, her posture too refined despite the obvious wear of her traveling clothes. This was a woman unaccustomed to the hardships of frontier life. "You're not from around here," he stated, not unkindly. "No, sir, Chicago originally, my husband." Her voice caught. "Thomas passed 6 months ago, influenza. We had a small bookshop, but the debts," she straightened her shoulders. "I have references from the family I worked for before my marriage." Owen's expression remained unreadable as he gestured toward the house. "Come inside, Mrs. Barrett, Nora Barrett." Inside, the house told its own story of absence. The furnishings were solid but sparse. A fine layer of dust covered the mantelpiece, and a stack of unwashed dishes filled the kitchen sink. Books and children's toys lay scattered across the floor in haphazard piles. "Please sit," Owen said, clearing a chair at the kitchen table. "Coffee." "Thank you." As he set the pot to boil on the cast iron stove, a thundering of footsteps echoed from above, and 2 small figures appeared on the stairs. The boy couldn't have been more than 8, with his father's stormy eyes and a shock of unruly brown hair. Behind him, a little girl of perhaps 5 peeked out, blonde curls framing a face that still carried traces of baby softness. "Pa, Liam stole my..." The boy stopped short at the sight of a stranger in their kitchen. "Who's she?" "Michael," Owen admonished gently. "Mind your manners, this is Mrs. Barrett." Nora smiled warmly. "Hello, Michael, and you must be Liam." The little girl shook her head, golden curls bouncing. "I'm Lily, I'm 5 3/4." Something in Nora's chest tightened at the sight of the children, their clothes slightly mismatched, Lily's hair unbrushed, Michael's pants sporting a poorly mended tear at the knee. These children needed a mother's touch. "Mrs. Barrett is looking for work," Owen explained, his voice measured as he poured the coffee. "As a housekeeper?" Michael asked, eyes narrowing with the wariness of a child who had seen too many come and go. "Something like that," Owen replied, placing a steaming cup before Nora. "I have 2 children myself," Nora offered. "Emma is 8 and James is 6. They're staying at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house in town until I find a way to feed them," she thought, but didn't say. Owen's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "You left your children in town." "Just temporarily. Mrs. Holloway was kind enough to watch them while I searched for work." Nora clutched her cup. "Mr. Abernathy, I won't pretend our situation isn't desperate. My husband's death left us with nothing, and I've traveled as far as my means would allow." I'm a hard worker. I learn quickly, and I'm not afraid of long hours. The rancher's eyes held hers for a long moment before he turned to his children. Michael, take your sister and go wash up for supper. But Pa, now, son. When the children had gone, reluctantly trudging back upstairs, Owen leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. Mrs. Barrett, I won't lie to you. We need help here, that's plain enough to see. Since my wife died giving birth to Lily, we've had a string of housekeepers, none lasting more than a few months. This is hard country for a woman alone. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Abernathy. I don't doubt that, but my children— He paused, choosing his words carefully. They need more than clean floors and hot meals. They need stability. Someone who won't leave when the first cattle buyer comes through town offering marriage, or the first winter blizzard makes them homesick for city comforts. Nora set down her cup with a quiet determination. Mr. Abernathy, I have nowhere else to go. No family back east, no prospects, and 2 children depending on me. I didn't come west seeking adventure or a husband, I came seeking survival. If you're worried about my commitment, I can only offer my word that I will work every day to earn my keep and provide for my children. Owen's weathered hands wrapped around his coffee cup. My children need more than a housekeeper, Mrs. Barrett. They need someone who will be here come hell or high water, someone who will teach Lily how to be a young lady someday, who will help Michael with his letters. Someone who will remember that Lily's afraid of thunderstorms and Michael won't eat anything green. You're asking for a mother, Nora said softly. I suppose I am. Owen's expression was unreadable, and that's not a position I can hire for. Nora's heart sank. I understand. But, Owen continued after a moment, I do need a housekeeper, and I have a cabin on the property that might suit a family of 3 better than Mrs. Holloway's rooms. He named a modest wage, less than she'd hoped, but enough to feed her children. The cabin needs work, but it's solid. Your children would have to help around the ranch when they're not in school. Relief washed over her like a cool stream. Thank you, Mr. Abernathy. We won't disappoint you. Don't thank me yet, Mrs. Barrett. Life out here isn't easy, especially with winter coming. He stood, indicating their conversation was at an end. You can fetch your children tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. The following morning dawned crisp and clear as Nora led Emma and James up the long drive to the double circle. Emma, serious beyond her years with dark braids and thoughtful eyes, carried their mother's determination in the set of her small jaw. James, smaller and more wiry, bounced with each step, his natural exuberance returning at the prospect of living on a real ranch. Will there be horses, Mama? James asked for the 3rd time since they'd left town. Yes, my love. Mr. Abernathy raises cattle and horses. Can I ride one? That will be up to Mr. Abernathy, Nora replied, smoothing his unruly hair. And you'll need to learn properly first. Emma remained quiet, taking in the vastness of the ranch with solemn eyes. Is this our home now? She finally asked. Nora squeezed her daughter's hand. For now. Mr. Abernathy has offered us a cabin. It's just temporary until we get on our feet. But Emma was perceptive. Like the rooms in Denver were temporary, and Cheyenne— This is different, Nora promised, though she had no right to make such assurances. We're going to make a fresh start here. They were met in the yard by Michael, who eyed the newcomers with undisguised curiosity. Pa said to show you to the cabin when you got here, he announced, hands thrust deep in his pockets. Emma stepped forward, offering her hand with the poise that always made Nora's heart ache with pride. I'm Emma Barrett. This is my brother James, and you've met our mother. Michael stared at her outstretched hand for a moment before shaking it awkwardly. Michael Abernathy. He jerked his chin toward a path leading away from the main house. Cabin's this way. The cabin sat nestled against a small copse of cottonwood trees about a 1/4 mile from the main house. It was smaller than Nora had imagined, a single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn wooden floors, and windows that would need resealing before winter. A rusted iron bedstead stood against one wall, and a wooden table with 4 mismatched chairs occupied the center of the room. It ain't much, Michael said, watching their faces. Pa said we've got some extra blankets in the storehouse, and there's a pump out back for water. James had already claimed the loft space, scrambling up the ladder to the small sleeping area. Mama, I can see the whole ranch from here. It's perfect, Nora said, meaning it despite the cabin's obvious shortcomings. It was shelter. It was theirs at least temporarily, and it represented a chance. Michael shuffled his feet. Pa wants you at the house once you're settled, said to start with fixing dinner. He's out with the hands until sundown. By late afternoon, Nora had transformed the Abernathy kitchen. Countertops gleamed, floors had been swept and mopped, and the delicious aroma of beef stew simmered on the stove. Emma sat at the kitchen table, carefully mending one of Lily's dresses, while James and the Abernathy children played a boisterous game of tag in the yard, their laughter drifting through the open windows. When Owen returned, trail dust coating his clothes and fatigue evident in the lines of his face, he paused in the doorway, momentarily taken aback by the transformation. His gaze moved from the clean kitchen to Nora, who stood wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Mr. Abernathy," she greeted him. "Supper will be ready shortly. There's hot water for washing up." "Thank you, Mrs. Barrett." His eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary before he turned his attention to Emma. "You must be Miss Emma." Emma nodded, setting aside her sewing. "Yes, sir, I was just fixing Lily's dress." The seam was coming undone. Something like approval flickered across Owen's features. "That's mighty kind of you." "It's no trouble. Mama taught me to sew when I was little." Outside, a chorus of children's voices rose in playful argument, and Owen's expression softened. "Sounds like they're getting along." "Children adapt quickly," Nora said. "James has been desperate for playmates his age. And how are you finding the cabin?" "It's lovely. Perhaps a bit drafty for winter, but nothing that can't be fixed." Owen's gaze was assessing. "I'll have the hands help seal it up before the cold sets in." He hesitated. "Mrs. Barrett, I want to be clear about expectations. The children are to attend school when it's in session. When they're not in school, I expect them to help with age-appropriate chores. Emma seems old enough to learn household tasks, and James can help with the smaller livestock once he's properly trained." "Of course. We've never shied from hard work, Mr. Abernathy." "Owen," he corrected her. "If we're to share meals and property, Mr. Abernathy feels overly formal." "Then I'm Nora," she replied, a small smile touching her lips. "And I should warn you that James will be pestering you about the horses before the week is out." A hint of amusement crinkled the corners of Owen's eyes. Michael was the same at his age. Nearly drove his mother to distraction with his talk of becoming a famous horse trainer. It was the first time he'd mentioned his late wife, and Nora sensed the wound was still raw despite the years that had passed. "Children need their dreams," she said softly. "Even when life teaches hard lessons." Their eyes met in a moment of shared understanding, two people who had seen the darker side of life's promises, yet still had children to raise, futures to secure. The moment was broken by the arrival of the children, bursting through the door in a whirlwind of energy and demands for attention. Owen excused himself to wash up, and Nora turned her attention to settling the excited youngsters for the evening meal. That night, as Nora tucked Emma and James into their makeshift beds in the cabin, Emma voiced the question that had been forming since their arrival. "Do you think we'll stay here, Mama? For real this time?" Nora smoothed the blanket over her daughter, choosing her words carefully. "I hope so, sweetheart. Mr. Abernathy Owen seems like a fair man and the children are lovely, but it depends on whether I can prove myself useful here." "I like it," James declared sleepily. "Michael's going to teach me to ride a pony." "Is he now?" Nora raised an eyebrow. "We'll see what his father has to say about that." After the children drifted off to sleep, Nora sat on the cabin's small porch, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. The vast Montana sky stretched endlessly above her, stars puncturing the darkness in dazzling arrays she'd never seen in the city. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel a fragile hope. The double circle might not be the life she'd imagined, but perhaps it could be the life they needed. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Each morning, Nora rose before dawn to start fires and prepare breakfast at the main house. The children attended the small schoolhouse in Fort Benton, riding together on the wagon Owen drove into town for supplies twice weekly. Afternoons found Emma helping with household tasks, while James shadowed Michael, learning the basics of ranch life with wide-eyed enthusiasm. Owen remained reserved but fair, his appreciation for Nora's work evident in small gestures, fresh-cut wildflowers appearing on the kitchen table, a rocking chair mysteriously delivered to the cabin porch, extra supplies of preserves and flour that he claimed were surplus. Lily had taken to following Nora like a shadow, soaking up maternal attention like parched earth receives rain. On a crisp October evening, as Nora finished the dinner dishes, she found Owen alone on the porch, staring out at the darkening landscape. "The children are playing checkers," she said, joining him at the railing. Lily insisted Emma read another chapter of that book about the pioneer girl before bed. Owen nodded, a half-smile playing across his features. "Sarah used to read to them every night. Michael remembers, but Lily." He sighed. "Sometimes I worry she'll grow up without any memory of her mother." "Children carry more in their hearts than we realize," Nora said gently. "Even memories they don't consciously recall shape who they become. You sound like you speak from experience." "My father died when I was young. I don't remember his face clearly, but I remember how safe I felt when he carried me on his shoulders." Nora wrapped her shawl tighter. "Those feelings never leave us." Owen turned to face her, the dying sunlight gilding his profile. "You've been good for them." "Better than good. Lily's nightmares have stopped, Michael's actually completing his schoolwork, and the house hasn't looked this welcoming since." He trailed off. "Since Sarah," Nora finished softly. "Yes." The silence between them held weight, things unsaid but increasingly felt. Nora had noticed the way Owen's gaze lingered when he thought she wasn't looking, how his hands sometimes hesitated near hers when passing dishes at supper. For her part, she'd found herself watching him with the children, his gentle patience with Lily, his quiet pride in Michael's accomplishments, and feeling a dangerous warmth spreading through her chest. "Winter will be here soon," Owen said, breaking the silence. "First snow usually comes before Thanksgiving. The cabin's much cozier now, thanks to your men sealing the windows and patching the roof." Owen cleared his throat. "About the cabin, I've been thinking. With winter coming, it might make more sense for you and the children to move into the main house. There's plenty of room, and it would save you trudging through snow before dawn." Nora's pulse quickened. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to intrude on your family's space." "It's practical, is all." Owen's tone was carefully neutral. "The children already spend most of their time together anyway, and with the busy season over, I'll be around more to help with them." Before Nora could respond, a commotion from inside drew their attention. James had apparently appended the checkerboard in a dispute with Michael, and Lily's wails indicated she'd been caught in the crossfire. As they stepped back inside to restore order, Nora caught Owen watching her a look that contained questions neither was ready to voice aloud. The first snowfall came earlier than expected, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Owen insisted on the move that same day, helping Nora and the children carry their meager belongings through ankle-deep snow to the main house. The children were ecstatic, especially when Owen revealed that the large upstairs room would be converted into a dormitory of sorts, with curtains separating the girls' and boys' sleeping areas. "It'll be like camping indoors," James declared, bouncing on one of the beds. Nora was given Sarah's old sewing room, a small but comfortable space with a window overlooking the ranch yard. Owen had cleared it of Sarah's personal items, but Nora couldn't help feeling like an intruder as she arranged her few possessions on the dresser. "I hope this is all right," Owen said from the doorway. "I know it's not much privacy." "It's perfect," Nora assured him, turning from the window. Too perfect, really. Owen, I can't help feeling that you've gone above and beyond what you do for a housekeeper. Owen leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Maybe that's because I stopped thinking of you as just a housekeeper weeks ago. The directness of his statement caught her off guard. I don't understand. I think you do. His voice was quiet but steady. Nora, when you came here, I told you my children needed more than a housekeeper. What I didn't realize was how much I needed more, too. Nora's heart thundered in her chest. Owen, I'm still in mourning. It hasn't even been a year since Thomas. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, he interrupted gently. I'm just being honest about what I've come to feel, what I think you might feel too, if you'll admit it. The space between them seemed to crackle with unspoken possibilities. It would be so easy to step forward, to let herself be held by those strong arms, to acknowledge the feelings that had been growing since that first day on the porch. But fear held her back, fear of loss, of disappointment, of building something only to watch it crumble again. I can't, she whispered. Not yet. Owen nodded, accepting her answer with quiet dignity. I understand, but I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. He straightened. In the meantime, we have 4 children who'll be wanting supper soon. As he turned to leave, Nora called after him. Owen. When he paused, she continued, Thank you for understanding, for everything. His smile, though tinged with sadness, was genuine. Your family now, Nora, all of you, however you want to define that. Winter on the double circle brought its own rhythm. Days shortened. Chores centered around keeping animals fed and watered, and evenings lengthened into storytelling and games around the fireplace. The household settled into domestic harmony, with Nora managing the indoor domain while Owen handled ranch operations. To the children, it seemed the most natural arrangement in the world. To the adults, it was an exquisite torture of proximity without resolution. Owen kept his word, never pressing Nora beyond their established boundaries, though his eyes often spoke volumes his lips did not. For her part, Nora found herself lingering in the kitchen after the children were abed, sharing coffee and conversation with Owen as snow piled against the window panes. They spoke of their past, her childhood in Illinois, his in Kansas, her brief happiness with Thomas in their Chicago bookshop, his courtship of Sarah when he was just establishing the ranch. I never thought I'd find myself here, Nora admitted one evening as they sat before the dying fire. When Thomas died, it felt like the end of everything. I couldn't imagine a future beyond survival. Owen stoked the embers. After Sarah, I felt the same, just putting one foot in front of the other for Michael and the baby. He glanced at her. What changed for you? Nora considered the question. I'm not sure it was any one thing, perhaps just time and the children needing me to be strong. She paused. And finding this place, finding you, she almost said, but caught herself. Finding a place where we belonged. You do belong here, Owen said quietly, all of you. The firelight painted golden patterns across his features, and Nora found herself studying the strong line of his jaw, the gentle curve of his mouth. In another life, another time, she might have leaned forward, might have bridged the gap between them. Instead, she rose reluctantly. It's getting late. The children will be up with the sun. Owen stood as well, closer than she'd realized. For a breathless moment, she thought he might reach for her, but he merely nodded. Good night, Nora. Good night, Owen. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Nora acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with Owen Abernathy. The realization should have frightened her, should have sent her retreating into the safety of grief and obligation. Instead, it settled in her heart like a seed finding fertile ground, tentative, yet full of promise. Christmas approached, bringing with it a flurry of preparation. Nora taught the children to make paper decorations and string popcorn garlands for the small pine tree Owen and Michael had cut from the north pasture. Emma and Lily worked in secret on gifts, giggling behind closed doors, while James and Michael conspired on mysterious projects in the barn. On Christmas Eve, after a festive supper of roast chicken and mince pies, Owen surprised everyone by producing a fiddle from the storage closet. "Pa can play," Lily announced proudly. "He used to play for Mama all the time." A shadow crossed Owen's face, but he settled the instrument under his chin. "I'm a bit rusty," he warned before drawing the bow across the strings. The simple melody of Silent Night filled the warm kitchen, transporting Nora back to childhood Christmases around her grandfather's hearth. Without thinking, she began to sing, her clear soprano rising to meet the fiddle's sweet tone. The children joined in, their young voices blending in imperfect but joyful harmony. When the song ended, Owen's eyes met Nora's across the room, a connection so profound it stole her breath. In that moment, surrounded by the children they both loved, she knew her heart had made its choice long before her mind acknowledged it. Later, after gifts had been exchanged, handmade treasures and practical items wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, and the children were tucked into bed with visions of Santa Claus dancing in their heads, Owen and Nora found themselves alone again before the fire. "I have something for you," Owen said, reaching into his pocket. "I wasn't sure whether to give it to you, but—" He handed her a small package wrapped in a handkerchief. Inside, Nora found a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a book, its cover etched with tiny roses. "Owen, it's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the intricate workings. "It reminded me of your love for books, and how you've brought beauty back into this home." Owen's voice was husky with emotion. "I know you're still honoring Thomas's memory, and I respect that. But I wanted you to have something that shows how much you mean to us. To me." Nora closed her hand around the brooch, its edges pressing into her palm. "Thomas would have wanted us to be happy," she said softly, the realization striking her with sudden clarity. "He was never a man to dwell in sorrow. And are you?" Owen asked, his question hanging in the air between them. "Happy, I mean." "Yes," she answered simply, honestly. "More than I thought possible after losing him." Owen moved closer, his hands coming to rest lightly on her shoulders. "Nora Barrett, I've fallen in love with you. With your strength, your kindness, the way you've mended not just this household but all of us. I don't expect anything in return, but I needed you to know." Tears welled in Nora's eyes as she looked up at him. "I've been so afraid," she confessed. "Afraid of feeling this way again, afraid of losing someone else I love." "Love," Owen repeated, hope kindling in his gaze. "Yes," Nora whispered. "I love you, Owen Abernathy. God help me, I've tried not to, but there it is." Owen's hands trembled slightly as they framed her face. "May I kiss you, Nora? I've wanted to since that first day you stood on my porch, proud and desperate and beautiful." In answer, Nora raised herself on tiptoes, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened into something that spoke of longing, of promise, of futures intertwined. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as years of loneliness dissolved in the warmth between them. When they finally parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he murmured. "Not right away if you're not ready, but someday. Let me love you properly. Let us be a real family, all 6 of us." Nora's heart soared even as practical considerations intruded. "The children already think of you as their mother," Owen finished, "and Emma and James as their siblings. You've seen how they are together." It was true. The 4 children had formed a unit so seamless, it was sometimes difficult to remember they hadn't always been family. Just that morning, Lily had called Emma her sister while they set the table, and neither girl had thought to correct the assumption. "Yes," Nora said, certainty filling her voice. "Yes, I'll marry you, Owen Abernathy. Not someday soon. Life is too uncertain for some days." Their second kiss sealed the promise, and as snow fell softly outside the windows of the double circle, 2 broken families became whole in the joining. News of their engagement spread quickly through Fort Benton after the new year. Most reactions were positive. The townsfolk had grown fond of the widow Barrett and her children, and everyone agreed Owen Abernathy had been alone too long. A few raised eyebrows at the relatively short time since Thomas Barrett's passing. But even the staunchest traditionalists couldn't deny the obvious happiness radiating from the entire Abernathy Barrett household. They set a date for early April, when the worst of winter would have passed, but before the demands of spring having consumed the ranch. Owen rode to Helena to arrange for a proper marriage license, returning with not only the paperwork, but also a bolt of cream-colored silk for Nora's wedding dress and small gifts for each child, acknowledgments of their place in the union being formed. As the wedding approached, practical matters took precedence. The cabin Nora had briefly occupied would be expanded for the ranch foreman's family, while Owen's bedroom would become theirs. The children would remain in their shared dormitory until they were older, though Owen spoke of adding rooms to the main house when time and funds allowed. "I want to adopt Emma and James formally," Owen told Nora one evening as they reviewed household accounts. "After the wedding. Make them legally Abernathys with full inheritance rights alongside Michael and Lily." Tears sprang to Nora's eyes. "You do that. They're my children now, too," Owen said simply. "Just as Michael and Lily are yours." The night before their wedding found Nora sitting on the porch swing, wrapped in a quilt against the early spring chill. The stars spread across the Montana sky like diamonds scattered on velvet, and she marveled at the journey that had brought her here from desperate widow to bride-to-be in less than a year. "Penny for your thoughts," Owen said, joining her on the swing. By unspoken agreement, he'd been sleeping in the bunkhouse for the past week, an old-fashioned courtesy that had amused his ranch hands no end. "I was thinking about the day we met," Nora admitted. "How terrified I was that you'd turn me away." Owen's arm slipped around her shoulders. "I nearly did. I'd seen too many women come and go, unable to handle the isolation or the work. But there was something in your eyes, a determination I recognized. Desperation, more like." "No," he shook his head. "Strength. The same strength that kept you moving forward for Emma and James, that helped you rebuild a life from nothing." His fingers traced the line of her jaw. "The same strength I fell in love with." Nora leaned into his touch. "I was so lost when I came here. Thomas and I had been childhood sweethearts. I never imagined loving anyone else. But you." She turned to face him fully. "You showed me that love isn't finite, that my heart could expand to include you without diminishing what I felt for him." "I feel the same about Sarah," Owen confessed. "She'll always be Michael and Lily's mother, always have a place in my heart. But loving you doesn't diminish that, it honors it, in a way. She would have wanted us all to be happy." Their lips met in a tender kiss, full of promise and tempered by the knowledge that tomorrow would bind them together before God and community. When they parted, Owen pressed something into her palm, a small key. "What's this?" Nora asked. "The key to the bookshop." At her confused expression, he continued, "I bought the old Tanner place on Main Street. It hasn't been used since old Mr. Tanner passed last fall. The town needs a proper bookshop, and you need something that's yours, something that honors the life you had with Thomas while building our future together." Nora stared at the key, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "Owen, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll fill it with books and stories. Say you'll teach our children to love reading as much as you do. Say you'll make it a place that brings knowledge and joy to Fort Benton." "Yes," she whispered, curling her fingers around the key. "Yes to all of it." They married the next day in the whitewashed church on the edge of town, surrounded by their children, ranch hands, and the townsfolk who had embraced Nora and her children as their own. Emma and Lily served as flower girls, strewing wildflower petals along the aisle, while Michael and James stood proudly as their father's groomsmen. Nora wore the cream silk Owen had brought from Helena, fashioned into a simple but elegant gown by her own hands, with Thomas's mother's pearls at her throat, and Sarah's lace handkerchief tucked into her sleeve, acknowledgments of the pasts that had shaped them both. When Reverend Simmons pronounced them husband and wife, Owen's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. The children cheered, rushing forward to embrace them both in a tangle of arms and laughter that represented everything they had fought for. The celebration continued at the double circle, where tables groaned with food contributed by neighboring ranches and town ladies. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit, and Owen pulled Nora into a dance, their first as husband and wife. Mrs. Abernathy, he murmured against her ear, the name sending a pleasant shiver down her spine. That will take some getting used to, she admitted with a smile. We have a lifetime for that. His arms tightened around her waist. A lifetime for all of it. Later, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, exhausted from excitement and celebration, Owen carried Nora across the threshold of their bedroom. The space had been transformed in her absence that day. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, new quilts adorned the expanded bed, and a vase of early spring wildflowers brightened the dresser. "Welcome home," Owen whispered, setting her gently on her feet. "I've been home since the day you let me stay," Nora replied, reaching up to trace the beloved contours of his face. "You and the children, you're my home now." His kiss was different this time, deeper, unhurried, filled with the knowledge that they had all the time in the world. As clothing fell away and they came together as husband and wife, Nora marveled at how life's hardest losses had led her to this moment of purest joy. Epilogue. 5 years later, the bell above the door of Barrett and Abernathy Books chimed merrily as Nora shelved the latest shipment of novels from back east. The shop had become a cornerstone of Fort Benton, not just selling books, but hosting reading circles, providing a library service for those who couldn't afford to buy, and serving as an unofficial community gathering place. Mama. 3-year-old Sarah Abernathy, named for the mother she would never meet but whose legacy lived on in the family's stories, toddled toward her with a picture book clutched in chubby hands. "Read this one." "In a minute, sweetheart," Nora promised, lifting her youngest daughter onto her hip. "Let Mama finish these shelves first." At the reading table in the corner, 1-year-old Thomas slept peacefully in his basket, guarded by his older siblings who took turns rocking him whenever he stirred. The 4 older children, now teenagers and preteens, had developed a fierce protectiveness toward their younger siblings, a family bond that transcended blood relations. The bell chimed again, and Owen entered, bringing with him the scent of pine and open air. Little Sarah squirmed out of Nora's arms, running to her father with a squeal of delight. Owen scooped her up, tossing her high before settling her against his chest. "How are my girls today?" he asked, crossing to press a kiss to Nora's forehead. "Busy," Nora replied with a smile. The new shipment arrived, and we've had a steady stream of customers. How was the timber meeting? Productive. We've secured rights to the North Ridge for selective cutting. Owen set Sarah down, encouraging her to join her siblings. And I stopped by the school. Michael's teacher says he's ready for college preparatory studies. He's thinking about veterinary school. Pride swelled in Nora's chest. He'll make a wonderful veterinarian. He's always had a way with animals. Gets that from his mother, Owen said, his eyes soft with memory. Sarah would be proud of him, of both of them. He glanced toward Lily, now a graceful 10-year-old who had inherited her mother's artistic talent and her stepmother's love of literature. Both their mothers are proud, Nora corrected gently, taking his hand. Just as both James and Emma's fathers would be proud of them. It was their way acknowledging the pasts that had shaped them while celebrating the present they'd built together. The children grew up with stories of both Sarah and Thomas, understanding that love expanded rather than divided when new family members joined the circle. Owen's arm slipped around Nora's waist. I was thinking we might expand the house again next spring. The children are getting older, and they'll want more privacy soon. Not to mention we might need more room if, Nora paused, a secretive smile playing across her lips. Owen's eyebrows rose. Nora Abernathy, are you trying to tell me something? She nodded, joy bubbling up inside her. Doctor. Winters confirmed it yesterday. We're expecting again, sometime in the fall. Owen's whoop of delight drew curious stares from the children. He lifted Nora off her feet, spinning her in a circle before setting her down with sudden concern. "Should you be lifting those heavy books? Or standing all day? Perhaps we should hire an assistant for the shop." Nora laughed, pressing her hand to his cheek. "I'm perfectly capable of running my bookshop for several more months, Owen Abernathy. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Not my wife. Not the mother of my children." His hand covered hers where it rested protectively over her still flat abdomen. "Not the woman who saved us all when she begged for work at a lonely ranch." "I didn't save anyone," Nora protested softly. "We saved each other." Owen's gaze held hers, filled with all the love and promises they'd shared over the years. "That we did, Mrs. Abernathy, that we did." As they joined their children at the reading table, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought them here from desperation to contentment, from loss to love, from two broken families to one unbreakable whole. When she'd stood on Owen's porch that autumn day, she'd been seeking mere survival. Instead, she'd found a home, a future, and a love that would sustain them through whatever life might bring. The Double Circle Ranch had become more than a name, it was a symbol of their family. Two circles joined to create something stronger than either could be alone. And as she looked around at the faces of the children, they shared both those born of their bodies and those born of their hearts. Nora knew that no matter what challenges might lie ahead, they would face them together, with the strength and love they'd built on the Montana frontier.